What's up? I'm Baratunde. It is the 3rd of November, 2020, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California, with a very special edition of Live on Lockdown, episode 45. 45 episodes I've been making of this show, and we're deep in it. We're deep in it. It is 1:28 p.m. Pacific here on the West Coast in the great California Republic, and I feel called to share some words. So here's what's going to happen over the next undefined unit of time. I am going to do some readings, some things that I've written, some things that others have written, and I'm going to share some stories. I put out a call on my text message line, 202-894-8844, for voter stories. And I have gotten some tremendous and emotional and powerful responses. So I want to share some of those stories with you. Feel free to add to the queue, 202-894-8844. It's my semi-public community text number. Do not worry about draining my battery. Got plenty of power. Got people power because we're doing it together. And I want to acknowledge the various spaces that we're in. I always like to push the bounds of my technology and flex on my quality internet connection. So big love to Sonic Internet Provider. They do not pay for this product placement, but without them, I couldn't do this. And we are streaming on Clubhouse, the semi-secretive audio app. What's up? You in the club? We're streaming on IG Live, where this all started from me. Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Periscope, and even LinkedIn. I'm wearing a button-up shirt for you, LinkedIn. This is my party shirt because I want to party today. I want to start y'all off with a poem. A friend of mine, good friend, just sent this to me 33 minutes ago, and it wasn't in the docket, but I thought you should know these words. So thank you, Julia, for sending in a poem called Breathe by Lynn Eliana Unger. Breathe, said the wind. How can I breathe at a time like this when the air is full of smoke of burning trees, burning lives? Just breathe, the wind insisted. Easy for you to say, if the weight of injustice is not wrapped around your throat, cutting off all air. I need you to breathe. I need you to breathe. Don't tell me to be calm when there are so many reasons to be angry, so much cause for despair. I didn't say to be calm, said the wind. I said to breathe. We're going to need a lot of air to make this hurricane together. Woo! Snapping for that author, snapping for myself with the snaps. Thank you again, Julia, for sending that in. That's our first reading today. I'm like filibustering on election day. Our next piece comes to us courtesy of yours truly. I wrote something, felt called to put some energy into the world that was more peaceful. And I want to thank the folks showing up. I acknowledge you on the various places we're at. Yavor Dekov on YouTube, I see you, brother. Stewart on Facebook, I see you. EJ Vernon on IG Live, I see you. And welcome to the room on Clubhouse, Tatiana. We up in here. We're doing this today. I published something through Time yesterday. Never written anything for Time before. And I had been hearing all these rumblings about civil war and decided to wield the pen, which is mightier than the sword, in defense of democracy with the power of the word. And so these are words that I put together for this moment we find ourselves in. Let me read to you. Let me speak to you. The President of the United States has undermined confidence in the electoral system and refused to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. He and members of his administration have celebrated and encouraged political violence by their supporters. The right wing in this country has spent decades stockpiling firearms in preparation for an interchangeable horde of imaginary villains to invade and take their freedoms. And for the first time I can remember, a significant number of liberals are starting to purchase firearms and plan to use force to defend against the violence that follows in the wake of this election. In a nation where guns outnumber people, I shouldn't be surprised that the guns are winning the argument. But to take up arms in response to an unwelcome election result is the opposite of patriotism. It undermines the democracy we claim to defend. The answer to disappointing elections isn't violence. It's more elections. It's organizing, it's funding, it's creating a new culture and new norms. Even when the government is overtaken by illegitimate or authoritarian forces, there is a rich and effective history of using strategic nonviolence to reject and refuse cooperation with those regimes and their institutions. The answer is for us to engage with each other and the process and to discover and use our collective power. Given where the United States is right now, to choose violence is to opt out of democracy, to bail on the process, to bail on the idea of us. Now, look, I understand why people may think that taking up arms is the only way, when our political and economic system have left so many behind. Why would we trust those systems? When the rules are written to benefit the few instead of the many, why would we follow them? When even those sworn to protect and defend us turn their weapons against us, who else can we trust with our security but ourselves? When so much of the world seems out of control, grabbing a gun seems to offer us the ultimate control and sense of much needed security. For people who feel powerless, guns promise power. That security and that power, however, are false, at best temporary. The fantasy we have of defending our homes against the MAGA maniacs or Antifa anarchists rarely, if ever, plays out that way in real life. It has a greater chance of leaving us wounded, dead, or traumatized. The reality is that those guns are more likely to be used by us to commit suicide. In the US, nearly 2/3 of all gun deaths are due to suicide, and across and access to a gun triples the risk of death by suicide. To hurt the people we love when arguments get out of hand. More than half of women killed by an intimate partner are killed with a gun, and access to a gun makes it 5 times more likely a domestic abuser will kill his female victim. To kill our children. Firearms are a leading cause of death for children and teens, or to be raised against the rare assailant only for us to miss or hit unintended targets. Then there's the scenario in which all of our fears and preparation meet. An intruder breaches our home screaming about building a wall or tearing down statues, and we access our weapon and we take aim, and just as we're ready to meet the moment, law enforcement arrives, sees our weapon, assumes we are the threat, and fires on us instead. As a black man, I think about this last scenario quite often. Police killed Philando Castile after he announced his weapon and his license to carry. Police killed Breonna Taylor after her boyfriend fired his weapon and hit an officer he thought was an intruder. There's ample evidence to suggest that guns wouldn't make me safer. Even in a scenario where we shoot and kill our intended target, we'll have to live with that for the rest of our lives. Researchers, especially those focused on veterans, find that the moral injury perpetrators of violence experience can be as real and long-lasting as the physical injuries victims of violence experience. We are told that guns will bring us a sense of security and peace of mind, but the emotional consequences of taking a life, guilt, shame, anger, and depression are never advertised in the heroic fantasies used to drive gun purchases. If all things line up the quote-unquote right way, that gun might provide 1 day of security. But in a year, the other 364 days, that gun is a threat to our security. With one side of our political divide decades ahead into weapons acquisition, the other side has seemingly rationally concluded it's time to play catch up. If my political opponents are arming up, shouldn't I? But this arms race, like all that have come before, only serves to bankrupt the buyers and enrich the sellers. For those of us who call ourselves liberal, what moral injury do we suffer when we buy guns, drive up weapons industry profits, and feed the very machine we want to dismantle? In August, Eric Liu, president of Citizen University and author of You're More Powerful Than You Think, appeared on my podcast and defined power as the ability to have someone do as you would want them to, whether it's a friend, an employee, a mayor, a child, whoever. He reminded us of the many ways we can exercise power, from spreading ideas to mobilizing large numbers of people to changing social norms. More recently, I hosted a discussion on strategic nonviolence with Jamila Rakib, executive director of the Albert Einstein Institution, which has identified 198 methods of nonviolent action. Quote, "We give our institutions and our leaders and our political systems power through what we do or what we refuse to do," Jamila explained. We as Americans, we inherit a democracy with multiple institutions of power and accountability, with various branches, with the ultimate ability to change any part of it to one that better matches our needs and reflects our values. We can write new laws. We can amend the Constitution. We can upgrade ourselves. Whether we are liberal or conservative, we don't need guns to make us more powerful. We're already powerful. What we need more of is each other. We need to show up as citizens, not in the legal sense, but in the active participatory sense. We need to participate in the process, which involves much more than voting. We need to invest in our relationships and make space to connect with one another. We need to understand all the forms of power we have, which are so much greater than any short-term surge of power derived from violence. And we need to deploy all this for the benefit of the many, not just ourselves, because we cannot do any of this alone. We are most powerful together. We can't shoot our way out of a political crisis. We have to citizen our way out. We don't need more guns. We need more democracy. Boop. And that's the signal, and that's like the end of the piece. So that's up on time.com. If you're on the internet in any way, you can find it on the internet. You know how to search for things in an unbranded search engine. Thank you for that. That was segment 1, block A of this Live on Lockdown, episode 45, 3rd of November, 2020, special election day edition. Good to see you. I'm going to take a little sip of something. Thank you, healthy juice-like substance. And I see Stewart's jumped over to YouTube from Facebook, from one billionaire to the next. Look at the diversity of options we have and our very just economy. Good to see you over here now, Stu. Everybody on IG, I see you. Thanks. Bring more people. Bring more people. I want to share some responses that I've gotten to this piece. Again, my text message number 202-894-8844. And I use it to update folks. I send local alerts. I solicit input and stories like the ones I'm about to share. I headlined this veteran story. I'm not going to share anybody's hyper-specific identity, but this is a person who wrote me in response to that piece. I'm a 22-year veteran, an analyst who found herself on the streets of Baghdad in 2017 in a turret seat behind an M2 that thankfully I never had to fire. I appreciate the deference you showed to the conflicting emotions that come with justified gun violence. I clearly remember the feeling of knowing I wouldn't hesitate to protect my folks while also being scared to death at the prospect of taking a life, even one that was trying to take my own. I never want to touch another gun again. But I too am finding that within my progressive bubble, my sentiments are in the minority these days. My sister just applied for a concealed carry license. I can't imagine any scenario where having it will come out good. Thank you, veteran, for your story. Here's another one from Dayton, Minnesota. Love this article. Very well said. Guns and violence are not the answer, May the blue wave come and in the days ahead, wash us clean, start anew, and bring health and peace. Here, here, Dayton, Minnesota. Thank you for that. And this is a bit of an extended tale from a California resident. I am grateful for your article and for you sharing these points. As a widow of suicide by firearm, it is incredibly painful to know that our citizens feel like guns are the answer. You are correct that firearms increase violence, self-inflicted or otherwise, like domestic violence. I'd like Democrats and Republicans who are gunning up to talk to me first. I'd like for them to learn the struggles that my daughter and I face every day. Like my family members not accepting the suicide. Like priests telling us to lie about the cause of death to our friends. Tell them it was a heart attack or car accident. The lies are endless. They impact our physical and emotional health as well as the health of the children left behind. The pain is numbing. Your friends leave because they thought your life was the white picket fence, and they think if it could happen to me, it could happen, maybe however remotely, to them. The truth is too much to bear. Then when you do seek help and assistance, you are perceived as vulnerable and an easy target for exploitation. Since we do not have husbands, it gives some the license to prey, P-R-E-Y. This does not exclude our children from being bullied with no consequences for the bullier. The bright side is that I have found out who I can trust and lean on. As a widow, I can see the truth clearer. The work is deep and just maybe I'm finding my Brooks' second mountain to climb. You receive multiple texts, I'm sure, because you've taken a leadership role in many ways. I doubt if you will read this. If you do, again, I want to say thank you. No, thank you. I read it. I see them all. And I really appreciate the honesty and the vulnerability of that. We don't get that story. The NRA doesn't ever buy ads for that. The gun manufacturers and the big business around it is never in the marketing and the slick graphics associated with what a gun will do for you. So let's do for each other in other ways. I won't belabor that point any further. That concludes commentary on the Time op-ed piece. But I want to share some of the stories that I have gotten from you, and then I'll close with reading a longer piece from some time ago. I put out a call, 202-894-8844, for folks to share what their voting experience has been so far. And Michelle in New Jersey, I just want to thank you for sending that photo. She sent a great image of her actively putting her ballot in the drop box. And it's just like democracy in action. That stuff makes me excited. I'm a nerd. It makes me excited. Joan in New Hampshire, I definitely voted for Biden/Kamala, and I'm also working the polls from 6 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Thank you for your civic service, Joan. I got this from Ina, who reported that Dixville Notch, that first place that returns any results in the country, placed the nation's first votes for president at midnight. Joe Biden won all 5 votes. This is the first clean sweep in Dixville Notch since 1960. Joe should declare victory. I love that. I love that. He shouldn't, but I love it. It's hilarious. Thank you, Ina. We have a Southern Cincinnati resident who said, I voted for Joe Biden. 4 years ago, I voted Trump because I was tired of the Clinton dynasty. I was also mad that both the Democratic and Republican parties couldn't come up with anyone better. If either of the nominations were different back then, I would have voted for that party instead. Though I typically vote Republican, I was tired of the Republican leaders not standing up for truth and decency. That's what I'm talking about. They had the chance to push against the president, but instead they chose to back and endorse the lies and bad behavior. That's why I voted against each Republican in the national and state races. And like you said, it felt good. Oh, I so want to throw just massive retirement parties for all these cowards, especially Lindsey Graham. I want to give him the biggest go away party. Well, we could throw a parade, like a farewell. Nah, 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 nah. You know, one of those. Hey, hey, hey. Goodbye. All right. We got Priya in Portland. I dropped off my ballot last week. Since you asked, I voted for Biden, as I do have at least one functioning synapse. And someone with an American flag bandana mask was sitting at a nearby bus stop. I thought, wow, What does it say that I'm paranoid? He's watching the Dropbox or something rather than just waiting for a bus. I know that feeling. You got COVID suspicion, and then you got like voter intimidation suspicion on top of that. But continuing with Priya's report, I know people whose ballots got destroyed in the Boston Dropbox arson, so it's not exactly paranoia. And now as I wait tomorrow or the upcoming days, weeks, etc., I'm preparing my go bag in case I need to leave the city. What world am I living in? I'm interested in learning about the voting election stories you'll collect. Yes, I don't need to read that part. I'm obviously doing that right now. Thank you. From Portland. Claire in Chicago, like this one. I voted by mail for Biden-Harris, and we're organizing over 20 different election day and early voting social distance musical performances around the state of Illinois. That's cool. They're doing this to thank people for voting and remind the public of the role of the arts and creatives in advancing democracy and the civic process. Featuring artists from the Chicago Symphony to Sones de Mexico to Southside jazz legend Ernest Dawkins. These performers are all being paid, but are also being wildly flexible and performing outside, masked, with no production support. It's a great project, and we pulled it together fast and with love, which is what we need right now. Hope you're hanging in there. Yes, Claire in Chicago. I never heard about that before. That's great. So yeah, just, let's stop the doom scrolling today. Let's celebrate each other. Let's give it up for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra playing in the streets for the people taken to the streets peacefully with their votes. Loving it. Let's see. Let me check in with the people here. Jossie, I see you. What's up? Kenya, come to Palm Springs. Would love to just hang out in the desert in a pool forever. Things get wild. Well, if things get wild, I'm not telling you where I'm going. I'm definitely not going to Palm Springs if things get wild. Oh, that's so good. All right. Oh, hey, Martha. See you up here live with us. Thank you. We've been going about 20 minutes. That's a good amount of time. Hello, Kat. Hello, Miss McGivney. Hello. Yeah, it's a love day. This is a love fest. Bring your friends. We got more coming. So, a couple years ago, I wrote something for Vox. Precisely 4 years ago. 4 years and minus 1 day. I wrote this piece on a plane, flying from New York to not America, the day after the 2016 election. And it ended up getting published in Vox. And I never got the numbers, but this thing traveled pretty far. And I've been thinking about that piece as we come up on another spin of the cycle. 4 years later, hair's grayer, heart fuller and also heavier at the same time. And I wanted to do a little time travel. So this next reading comes to you courtesy of a 39-year-old Baratunde, Rafiq Thurston, published in Vox Media on November 17th, 2016. The headline: Empathy isn't a favor I owe white Trump voters. It has to go both ways. And I wrote it because everybody was talking about healing, and we got to reach out to like the 5 coal miners in America and make sure they feel, good about Brooklyn and lattes and arugula and whatnot. And I think I just got a little exhausted of that unidirectional narrative of community. So let's see what I said. I actually haven't really reread this in a while, so I might surprise myself. And again, you're listening or watching, or maybe later in the future reading a transcript of. I'm Baratunde Thurston. This is Live on Lockdown, episode 45. We're at 1:52 p.m. Pacific. Oh, I have to update. I'm like, I don't use that kind of time. It's like 13:52. Updated the computer. Got to change the clock. No time like today to shift into a new era. But let's flash back. November 17th, 2016, I wrote this. I'm hurting and I'm tired and I'm not surprised. And I'm one of the people who will be relatively okay in this new, old America. All my papers are in order. I'm a heterosexual man. I'm black, yes, but I'm also privileged. I have a fancy degree and fancy friends and global access to what's passing for a new economy and a long-held skepticism about America's greatness, all of which gives me a certain amount of protection. Of course, I am on the record repeatedly excoriating the new commander of our armed forces, who has, on the record, repeatedly shown a penchant for seeking revenge. But all in all, I'm probably one of the lucky ones, even if my name is on Omarosa's enemies list. You remember Omarosa? Please don't remember Omarosa. I'm going to be doing real-time annotations on my 4-year-old piece. Many others are very unlucky. They are the ones I was voting for. Many of my fellow Muslim, undocumented, black, female, disabled Americans will suffer. The candidate who won did so by promising a hell for these people and more. We are already seeing some of the silent majority emboldened to heckle, harass, spit on, and assault those they don't consider real Americans. Now we'd have to update that to say kill. The bullying may be the worst part of these election results. How can you tell your child that bullying doesn't work when it's exactly what the new president did to get his job? Not in some distant, youthfully indiscreet past, but as a fundamental 2016 campaign strategy. The tweets are still there. I do not envy the parents of this young generation trying to explain why bragging about the size of your penis, encouraging sexual violence, and smearing entire ethnicities, religions, and nationalities is not the absolute best way to get ahead in this world. But I also know this. The pain liberals are feeling today is similar to the pain Mitt Romney's voters felt 4 years ago. I remember people crying over Romney's loss, and I remember laughing at their tears. Now I'm the one crying just thinking what I wouldn't give for a binder filled with qualified women, or a car elevator, or a corny-ass Ned Flanders sound-alike who served someone other than himself. Would it have been better if Romney won in 2012? I love my organic farming first lady and my silky voiced black president. I would be sad to have 4 fewer years of them, but what if that meant Donald Trump's power would be limited to Fox and Friends call-ins and 3 a.m. tweets? Will the suffering and green lighting of assault and deportations and sexism of the Trump years have been worth it? It's too soon to know. Only history will tell. Meanwhile, I hear these calls for empathy with the white working class that lashed out. Notice it's never the black or brown working class we are urged to hear. It is a compassionate and noble request, and it is one I am sympathetic to. I know I was often too busy occupied with my own pain and those of the people I see to think too hard about what happens to white identity in the face of rapid demographic, cultural, technological, and economic change. I know the political parties have failed, and the economic system has failed, and the media has failed, and not just failed my people, but the great middle of we the people. Writer Anand Giridharadas has written and spoken perhaps most eloquently on the subjects of empathy and reconciliation in this age of more winning winners and more losing losers. I highly recommend his TED Talk. Of course, it's a TED Talk. And New Yorker article. Of course, it's a New Yorker article. So I know I could have and can do more to listen, to be compassionate, to operate from a place of love. But more than what I could have done is what white people themselves could do. For this election is in part about white people's relationship to whiteness and each other. The degree to which white liberal urban America relied on polling reports in 538 and the upshot to tell them everything was going to be all right is incredible. I derived confidence from those predictions as well. We all stuck to those websites like a driver sticks to incorrect Waze GPS directions. Instead of driving, we acted like passengers, trusting in the machine instead of our own eyes. Meanwhile, outside the vehicle in the real world, the GOP nominee was making sweet, xenophobic, and job-promising love to the other white America. There's a group of white people who left the suburbs and the Midwest for those much maligned coastal elite cities to experience community and create new economy jobs and invent absurd artisanal mayonnaise. And while they were busy swiping on their phones through the faces of people just at the other end of the bar, they could and should have been talking to their cousins and uncles back home. White Americans, does the world have to pay for your broken family ties? Does Fiji have to drown and California burn because you got bored in Iowa? Don't you have Facebook? Didn't you invent it? So yes, more empathy for the people who lashed out. That's never a bad thing. The biggest problem in this world, too much empathy, said no one ever. But I also have another more pointed reaction to the people I'm supposed to be showing empathy for. Suck it up. Some of these same angry white Trump voters tell the descendants of slaves who experienced substandard healthcare and housing and jobs and justice, I didn't own slaves, get over it. Some of these same angry white Trump voters tell women who've been sexually harassed, you shouldn't have been wearing such slutty clothes. Some of these same angry white Trump voters tell anyone with a liberal critique of America, if you don't like this country, then leave it. But they aren't taking their own advice. They aren't leaving. No, they have dug in and lashed out, as has been their prerogative from the very beginning of this nation, because they always could. And in this election, they reasserted their claim on this land. We have faced these backward-moving backlashes before, after the Civil War, with unopposed domestic racist terrorism, after the legislative victories of the Civil Rights Movement, with the installation of a racialized police and prison state. I'm not saying that everybody who voted for the former online steak salesman is a racist or a sexist or an Islamophobe. That argument isn't even required to explain things. All we need to acknowledge is that by their votes, they showed us that they were okay with racism and sexism and Islamophobia. They valued their attachment to a bygone economic era over their attachment to the stated ideals of this nation when it comes to inclusion and equal protection under the law. I know compassion and empathy are hallmarks of the higher road. I also know that it's the harder road to travel because those who lashed out barely acknowledge the road exists. They often don't need to take the high road because the low road gets them where they need to go. Remember the white men with guns who got angry about their taxes and held the Malheur Federal Wildlife Refuge hostage for weeks? They took federal property, held it with arms, and in the end, got zero punishment for it. Philando Castile would have appreciated that type of American justice, but that wasn't the deal on the table for him and so many others. Meanwhile, many of those we are asked to empathize with are celebrating the retreat of political correctness so they can finally say what they feel. But do you imagine, angry white American, that you are the only one who hasn't been able to say how you feel? You think women in misogynistic workplaces have felt free to express themselves? You think Black Americans have felt free to tell police how we really feel? I mean, if we're going to take off the rhetorical gloves, then be prepared for everyone to take them off. I'm pretty sure there are things you haven't yet heard, because for us to utter them would be to shatter your world. So, I am both empathetic and angry. I get to be both. We should all be able to be both. But as we discuss the need for empathy, let us remember it needs to go both ways. It is not a cross solely to be borne by the oppressed in order to not hurt the oppressor's feelings. It is not just for liberals and Democrats to practice toward conservatives and Republicans. As Patrick Thornton wrote, it is not just for the cities to offer the rural. It is for all of us to embrace and struggle through and gain from. That's really the whole point of this democratic experiment. In part, this election happened because we are nowhere near being one nation. It used to be fashionable to write about and campaign on the concept of two Americas. Whoa, John Edwards flashback. Remember that dude? Please don't. In fact, the New York Times is still doing it. We should be so lucky to have only two Americas. Instead, we have thousands of Americas, isolated islands of self-referential media and lonely, disconnected lifestyles. We have gerrymandered our political districts into incumbency protection rackets. We have contorted our constitutionally prescribed media into profit-maximizing engines of mutually exclusive assuaging memes and inciting provocations. We have burdened and unacknowledged 0.5% with the task of fighting all our wars for us. And we have ported increasing amounts of our lives into the networked infrastructure of the internet, which serves us what best serves the ad makers to keep us online, clicking, and isolated. Civil society be damned, jobs be damned, spirituality be damned, public good be damned. So long as the money is flowing, we have embraced all this. It is, as we say in the technology world, a feature, not a bug. The system is working as designed. And then we act surprised when a master appears on the scene and shows us how to put all these pieces together in a brilliant coalition. The man who got into a Twitter fight with a former Miss Universe read the public better than any data analytics team. He hacked the media business model's addiction to sensation without real need of Russian cyber terrorists. He innovated in what passes for political communication, pointing out the undeniable failures of our system. He gave voice to a rising chorus of rage. He played off our fears and our weaknesses and became an overwhelming denial of service attack against our entire society. We were practically inviting him in with open ports. And the hard truth is that he was not entirely wrong. Of course, he was wrong about the size of his net worth and his penis and his hands and just about every half-baked policy proposal he uttered. But the system is rigged. The system is rigged for investors, owners of capital, inheritors, people like our next least prepared president. The social compact is broken. We have severed our social safety nets just as we've hurled ourselves out the window. The economy doesn't work for the great middle class, and the man who said women should be punished for having legal abortions wasn't the only one to see it. Bernie Sanders saw it. Occupy Wall Street saw it. Black Lives Matter saw it. Generations of Native Americans have seen only this dark side of the United States. All these forces tried to get our collective attention, but collective attention is a rare commodity in our overstimulated environment. It took an angry, self-serving, nasty old white dude from beyond the political establishment to break through the noise he helped create. So now, our attention is focused for the moment. What do we do with it? We study history. Those of us who glamorize the great old days without acknowledging on whose backs that greatness was achieved do a disservice to the present and the future. And for those of us fighting for justice, there are several playbooks and source code repositories left behind by abolitionists, trade unionists, feminists, artists, prisoners, and more. History is not a circle, but more probably a spiral. in which we revisit similar but not exact coordinates from the past. We should revisit that past and prepare for the troubling times ahead. We protect our vulnerable. Life is about to get measurably worse for many who are not prioritized by the incoming administration and others who are seen as outright enemies. We need to build our own networks of support and resilience in the face of the coming storm. In this state of emergency, we should be donating to nonprofits, investing in civil society, helping our undocumented neighbors, and supporting independent media. We resist. There is more to democracy than elections. There are all the rights and responsibilities enshrined in our Constitution. We have an obligation to that Constitution more than any president, to defend and embody its ideals in the face of a new leader who has no record of doing so. President Trump will do some good, perhaps even great things in office. Oh, wow. I wrote that 4 years ago. So generous. But we cannot forget the aberrant methods he employed to gain that office. And we have no obligation to make his job easier when that job involves undermining the values that have the potential to make us great. If we need any guidance, look to the Republican Party's action during Obama's presidency. All he did was try to give us health care, and they shut down the entire government. We remember that out of suffering, healing is possible. Out of darkness, light shines brighter. And not to sound all yoga about it, but we cannot have one without the other. Had Hillary Clinton won, many of us would have moved on as if all was right with the world, but the world is very wrong. And the impact of that wrongness is on display for all to see. This is an opportunity to dig deeper into our imaginations and collective intelligence for solutions, to make great art, to forge stronger human connections, to plant deeper community roots, to try to listen to each other. We develop a new story. We have repeated and fed off the American myth for too long after it stopped bearing any resemblance to the truth for too many. All the forces that unleashed this most recent backlash are still at play. The future is only coming at us faster, and it will not wait for us to get our shit together. You think self-driving cars will make any of this better? You think the Martian colony will save us from the problems of Earth? You think Skynet will be any easier to defeat, divided and conquerable as we are right now? No. This all gets harder. That old story we told ourselves, that hard work and a 9-to-5 and a private home and a car and grotesque amounts of natural resource consumption and the privatization of public space and the ignoring of history would deliver the American dream is dead. We need a new story that starts with who and where we are now and defines where we want to go. A story that includes the immigrant, the incarcerated, the evangelical, and the engineer. A story that redefines what success means for a nation founded imperfectly on near perfect ideals. A story that encourages us to sacrifice. That's a story that encourages us to see sacrifice for each other as gain for us all. And we must allow ourselves to feel the agony and exhaustion and despondency of this transition. To paraphrase a past president violently taken from us at another low point in our history, we need to do these things not because they're easy, but because they are hard. Like that high road, it's the difficulty that makes them worth doing. I wrote that in November of 2016. Here we are in November of 2020, waiting to see which road we're on. Waiting to see how universal the calls for empathy will be this time. Keep it in mind. Waiting to see what story we're going to write next. We're trying to move backwards. with the same president or a new one? Are we ready to move forward? Are we ready to move on? Are we ready to grow? Are we ready to know each other? That's what I'm here for. So thanks for listening. I'm Baratunde Thurston. This is Live on Lockdown, special episode 45, 3rd of November 2020. I'm streaming everywhere. Clubhouse audio app, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Periscope, YouTube, IG. I see you. I hear you. I feel you. I love you. We gonna do this one way or the other. We gonna do this. I wrote that article on a plane. Wow. Wow. I'm tired, yo. I'm real tired. I look back at and remember where my heart was, where my fear was 4 years ago. And I sadly realize my fear wasn't big enough. I foresaw some things. I didn't see COVID. I thought the tweets would stop. Even I expected a little more from Marco Rubio. It all was much darker. And I was foretelling doom. Here we are, 250,000 of us, not here with us. Here we are with the president encouraging violence. Here we are with members of the Republican Senate encouraging violence, mocking, taking it seriously. And I just got a feeling we're done with that. Been thinking about the healing thing. I love healing. I love the idea of it. I think we need it. And I try to channel the restorative justice believer in me that wants to give people second chances and wants to hold people accountable and hold them in community. Let's see what happens here. But if we wake up in a new America with new leadership, we're going to have to decide what accountability looks like for those who tried to drag us into the dark ages, who tried to destroy votes. What do you do with that? How do you reckon with that? And on the other side of all this, that effort to come together cannot be from one side only. It just can't. Otherwise, it's not genuine. It lacks integrity. And for all the talk that I have seen and heard over the past 4 years, 4 months, 4 weeks, it's a bunch of liberals talking about reaching out. It's a bunch of liberals talking about the Dalai Lama. It's a bunch of... Maybe I'm not tuned into the right channels. But win or lose, it's up to all of us to try to stitch this place back together. And I will not tolerate an expectation that it's only the left that needs to reach out to the right. We hold people in community, yes. We also got to hold them accountable. There's a lot to answer for. There's a lot of bodies piled up in the corner. Family's been ripped apart. And you don't just get to wait for me to show up and ask if you're okay after all that. So let's dig deep on this. Empathy and anger, they are not mutually exclusive. Love and truth. Love and truth. We gotta be true. All right, I'll be back. Maybe later tonight, maybe tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Check the status of your vote. Try not to freak out. Breathe. And remember a couple of things. With respect to the current president, hopefully outgoing, he says a lot of things. Doesn't make it true. Doesn't make it law. So, take deep breaths. Support your election officials. Send them some cupcakes and pizza. Maybe choose one of those things. That's an odd digestive combination. Cupcakes or pizza to your local elections officials. I am so proud of the county elections officials, over 3,000 of them in these United States, who have withstood ransomware attacks, misinformation, intimidation, and undermining by the commander-in-chief, by an entire half of the political establishment. Thank you all for your service, for responding to keep the bandwidth of democracy flowing, keep that throughput happening, increase the fidelity of our system by letting people vote. Thank you for that. Our worst fears so far are not being realized, in part because of you, in part because we are prepared. That's good. So send some cupcakes or pizza to your local elections officials. 866 Our Vote is the number to call if you see any shenanigans. Ignore 538. Seriously, just don't even give them any traffic. And wait for it. Wait for it. We got millions of votes out there that can't even begin to be counted until the polls close today in states like Pennsylvania. Wait for it. Good things come to those who wait, especially when we have the truth on our side. There's a moment of truth. All right, I'm out. There are so many buttons to push to stop this. I don't know. All right, let's IG Live. Goodbye to you first. Thank you. All right, that's going there. Done post. And then other Streamland, YouTube, LinkedIn. I'm not gonna list all of them, but I see you. Thank you so much. We're gonna stop this. So many apps. It's crazy. All right.